Let's build a floating island of Tzeentch. Like all great terrain projects, this one's going to start out with high density foam. This stuff is normally used for insulation of a home, but we're going to be using it to build the island and the base of the island. Let's start by drawing a 7-inch square on the piece of foam. Once the square is complete, I have to fit in an equilateral triangle somewhere inside of the 7-inch square. I'm drawing my triangle 1 inch from the border and making the triangle side 6 inches long. Just as a refresher, an equilateral triangle means that the internal angles are 60 degrees. The size of the actual triangle inside doesn't really matter, you just have to fit it within the 7-inch square. If you want to follow along with my exact measurements and then venture out later, you can. Once the triangle is complete, you want to mark out the center of each side. It should be 3 inches from the vertex if you're following my exact measurements. Now that that's complete, you want to perform the exact same process again on a second piece of foam. Same sizes, same everything. The only difference is that you don't have to mark out the halfway points of your sides of the triangle. Now let's cut out the squares. Now that we have the two pieces cut, we have to shape them into our floating disc islands. I'm going to use a hot wire foam cutter, but you can use whatever is laying around and whatever can give you a nice clean cut. The important thing to remember is not to cut inside of the triangle. Always stay outside of the perimeter of the triangle. Once the first shape is cut, what you want to do is you want to take that and put it right on top of the second piece and then trace an outline. What you're going to try to do is you're going to cut through that outline so that you have two somewhat similar sized pieces. Now that you have these two pieces, what you want is to drill a hole where you made the marks on the first piece and also on the vertices of the other triangle that didn't have the mark in the center of the sides. Se va llenando la noche con rumores de canción. Now what you're going to do is you're going to cut 4 6-inch long chains. These are going to be fed through the holes that you just drilled, and they are going to be holding up the entire floating island. I'm using chain, but you could use pretty much anything you want. If you just want simple rope or string, that works as well. Once the chain is cut, you want to feed the chain through the holes like I said, and then just leave them there. You want to do this only to one island piece, not both of them. It doesn't matter which one. Once those are fed through, you want to quickly secure them in place. I'm using hot glue. I suggest you also do hot glue just because it dries quicker. Se va llenando la noche. While the hot glue is drying, I'm going to start cutting out the leg pieces that are going to be holding up the floating island. To do this, we have to make a 60-degree cut on a 1-inch thick cube, like so. We have to make 2 of these, and actually if you just flip the cut that you just made upside down and then trace out the length of the piece, you could just simply cut it. The 60-degree cut is already there. These should be 4.5-inch long. Now we're going to glue these legs onto the islands, but before we do that, we want to drill a hole 1/2 inch from the flat end of the cube on both pieces. and then feed the final chain, the fourth chain that you cut, through one of the holes, and then hot glue the chain piece to that one piece. Only one piece. Don't hot glue the other piece. The other piece you just want to feed it through and just have it sit there for now. The next thing you want to do is you want to hot glue the angled end of the leg to the vertex of the triangle, just like this. Once the legs are dried and secured onto each island, we want to flip the island so that the two legs run at an angle from each other, but never touch. And then you want to feed the chains that should be dangling down to the corresponding vertices, or if you decided to put the chain or hot glue the chain to the vertex, then to the corresponding halfway point of the sides. Secure these with hot glue as well.
Hay que saber que la verdad es lo único que nos va a salvar y que nos hará mejores personas. Protesten, quéjense, no se dejen, prepárense, hagan de su vida lo que ustedes desean.
This next part is the tricky part. Once the glue has dried from all of the connected chains, you need to pull on the loose chain that is going through the hole of the leg, and then create tension in order to hold the thing up. This is gonna be hard at first, but once you get the hang of it, all it is you need to find a balance. And then once the balance is there and the top of the island is basically floating the way it's supposed to and it's leveled, you want to secure the loose chain with hot glue. You can cut any extra chain from the center piece and then just step back and see how the island balances. If you need to tweak it a little bit, you can. All you have to do is pull on one of the side chains or ropes and then find a place where you could level the top of the island. Don't stress out too much about the top level of the island. We're going to be adding paint and a bunch of other stuff to it, so the balance of that top island is going to shift. We'll correct that towards the end. Now that you have your terrain piece looking like this, what we want to do is we want to go back to the wire foam cutter and shape the bottom of the island so that it's more accessible for minis. Cut pieces that make it more slanted and allow you to actually place miniatures underneath the island. Also, cut pieces from the center of the legs to make it look a little bit more organic, but don't go too crazy because that's kind of where the structure is. So if you weaken the legs, the entire thing is just going to collapse. We're also going to shape the island with the foam cutter by slicing away from the bottom to the top of the piece. Be careful not to cut any of the chain or the hot glue that is securing the chain to the piece. This is what the terrain piece should look like so far. In order to make the whole piece look more island-like, we're going to use Sculpt-A-Mold. This material is like paper mache mixed with a little bit of plaster. It's going to erase a lot of the straight lines that we cut with the foam cutter, and it's going to give the piece a slightly more realistic look, which is really what we're searching for. It's a matter of you molding it to fit an aesthetic that you like. If you actually like this, just leave it like this and get to the painting. But if you want to add some more organic shapes to it, then the Sculpt-A-Mold is awesome. Once everything is dry, we're going to begin priming the whole thing in the Blackmagic Craft fashion by using Mod Podge and black paint. When the primer finally dries, it's time to paint this terrain piece. I'm going to do a heavy dry brush of dark gray. The reason I'm going with grays is because I kind of want to match this to other terrain pieces that I have. If you are going for a Tzeentch vibe, then maybe you should use like pinks or blues or something that has to do with like vibrant colors of a demon world. I want it to look just simple gray and rocky, so I'm going with a dark gray for now.
Always used to put my freedom first in any situation. I knew I never had that much to lose. I thought that I had seen it all before.
After the heavy dry brush of the dark gray has dried, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of white to my gray and then do a lighter dry brush of this mixture of white and gray. Once that is dry, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take simple white and do a very light dry brush on the whole piece. Now it's time to work on flocking the top of the island. Just like my previous terrain pieces, I have 3 different colors of green flock. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the entire top of the island with some PVA glue. Well, I shouldn't say the entire top. What I'm doing is I am leaving the places that are raised to make those seem as if they are the rock coming from the bottom of the island. And I am only going to be adding glue with a brush around the areas that should be flat and where grass would grow. So I'm going to do a mixture of 3 different colors of flock and then just sprinkle it on there. Once the flocking is done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some PVA glue and I'm going to take some moss. What I want to do is I want to attach the moss with the PVA glue to the sides of the island. That way it kind of drapes down and you get that illusion of a floating island, because this greenery, or in this case this moss, is growing out and down towards the bottom. Gravity is just pulling it down to the side. I'm going to chop up some of the moss and sprinkle it onto the top of the island just to add more yellow in the field of green that I created. I'm going to attach it with PVA glue as well, and then I'm just going to let the entire thing dry. And there you have it, the floating island of Tzeentch. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will talk to you tomorrow. This was Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.
Always used to put my freedom first in any situation.